Good evening, my dear, and everybody. I would like to welcome you very warmly to this cycle, What's Hidden in Nature today, with my guest, honoris causa Doctor. We would like to thank you, first of all. Thank you very much for your participation in the previous meeting in such huge numbers, where we spoke about the values of chlorophyll. I'm so happy that today you have decided to spend this time with us. And today, our guest is an extraordinary person. Probably most of you know him very well, Dr. Honoris Causa Piotr Kardasz, who is a biologist, a journalist, but most of all, for me personally, one of those people who've got plenty to say about nature and what it hides and what it's got to offer. He's a person who has an extraordinary connection with nature, who has a huge heart for nature, but also for all those people who feel like drawing from nature, a person with a great heart to offer. Doctor, I'd like to welcome you very warmly. I'm so pleased that you found time to meet us and to talk about. And what are we going to talk about? Thank you very much, Paulina, for this kind presentation of myself. In such circumstances, usually I'm not too shy before presentations. No, I'm slightly embarrassed because what I do is my profession. And I would like everyone to identify with the work they do. The fact is that my experience of almost 50 years in the sector, when I've tried to learn the secrets of nature, doing everything I could, even going around the world to learn about the natural resources and factors that influences. Today, that makes me so happy to tell you about one of the most important ingredients for our lives, which is collagen. So I've decided to say that it's a secret, if you allow me. This is the secret of collagen, because scientific work is still ongoing, and we have fantastic publications. And based on those scientific evidence from many of the best institutes around the world, I'm trying to give you just a fragment of this message, but there's always something remaining. It turns out that the secret of our lives is so huge, and we learn more and more new things. I try to communicate with the scientific world on a regular basis. It turns out if I spend 2 weeks not looking there, and in fact, I'll be telling you on an ongoing basis what we have discovered. Then we are going to talk about the substance that I'm presenting to you in this way. Well, imagine that collagen makes up 30% of our body weight. But saying that, it's not really enough because actually it goes into the structure of all tissues. And we are talking not just about the tissue, which is just collagen, because collagen is a substance, a simple one, but why it is so mysterious, because glycine, proline are two amino acids, and the third one, which is lysine, was secondarily selected because basically only collagen starts to work when it's accompanied by a biological background in the form of vitamin C. And vitamin C causes it to trigger the mechanism that hydroxyproline and hydroxyglycine, but also hydroxylysine is the secondary vitamin C, which allows us to enhance that. And imagine 3 amino acids, and after all, we have 20 amino acids that determine our life. They decide about the functions of all the organs of each cell because they also depend on the collagen. All of them? All of them. Although you will learn that some tissue must be singled out. Well, surely each of us is interested in their own skin. In fact, 30% of that, as you know, is pretty much our skin, as you can imagine, which is shaped by collagen, and naturally the assisting substances can normally weigh around 5 kilograms. Well, for you, it's going to be less, but for a big man, including the fatty tissue, in the bedding of the dermis can weigh up to 50 kilograms. So, of course, such a man weighs, let's say, 120 kilograms. Can you imagine that? At this point, it has to be an efficient function. And then there is the muscle tissue, which depends on collagen. And then there is the connective tissue, which is crucial for our lives. And I want to tell you that the connective tissue is unique because it is divided into the solid tissue, and we're talking about bone, the elastic tissue, we're talking about cartilage, and the fluid tissue, blood and lymph, but everything that is related to that. And speaking of which, the internal glands that take care of immunity are linked by collagen structures. What else? Yeah, it is worth saying that during the embryonic development, there is embryonic cotyledons appear. This is the reproductive tissue of the connective tissue. And at this point, it determines the development of the fetus all the way to the end. You could say it is the main factor in the formation of life. But let me say, until the very end, there is also something else left, because you know that our body regenerates, and there is this remaining part of the reproductive connective tissue that stimulates the regeneration of all bodily organs through collagens that is there in different proportions. And now, the epithelial tissue, as you know, if we are talking about the very tissue of our skin, the superficial tissue, not very much over that, because it can basically even weigh a dimension of like a 0.5 millimeter, and it is flat, whereas the dermis has sort of fibrous tissues, and that's where they have glands and lymphatic vessels, and also microcapillaries. They also are part of the connective tissue structure. I have told you about muscular tissue. I have told you about the epithelial tissue. So you can see what potential collagen has got for our lives. And now, let me focus on the formation of the connective tissue structures and its functionality, because these functions are taken over by the connective tissue because it builds all tissues first of all, but naturally it depends on our shape and later our appearance. There is the bone tissue, which is saturated with collagen because collagen cells also distribute substances, and consequently later they need to deliver from our blood onto the skin the material which continues to build up, regenerate its structure. But it is not only the bones, at the same time all the muscles and all the organs, they all depend on the connective tissue, but also the connective tissue proper, which is a variation of the reproductive tissue. But this shows its specifics and universality. There is research in progress, and scientists, especially Israeli scientists, often say that the whole physiology would need to be redefined because there is some information which says that we treat certain aspects too superficially when talking about the structure of the human body and the functions thereof. And now they are involved in the construction of absorption and immunology of the gut. You know that the gut is made up of epithelial tissue, and there is also unique structures. Until recently, we didn't even know, until 2008, what bacteria is functioning in our body. But they don't just function as an unknown entity, because if we have 1,000 bacteria and various strains, they primarily prepare foodstuff by fermentation, so that enzymes can extract individual ingredients such as proteins, fats, or carbohydrates, but also they extract micro and macro elements and vitamins. And naturally, at this stage, there is such a thing as Peyer's patches, which determine our immunity. 80% of the immunity in this epithelium, which has collagen in structure, which determines about our immunity. And erythrocytes are such centers which, on the one hand, pass the material that has been digested through, so the liver can just clean it up. but the stroma of the liver also made of collagen. Please bear in mind that the liver is a giant radical because of its over 380 enzymes, which on a regular basis are used, but also function in the as a control in the body. And to this, of course, if we are talking about the erythrocytes, there's also another secret. Imagine that in addition to the beneficial bacteria that have fulfilled this role, we have undesirable bacteria entering our body, which are usually anaerobic bacteria. So they can start the putrefaction process. At this point, they pollute the environment and they damage the potential of the beneficial bacteria formation. And what happens to that body? Well, erythrocytes at the same time decide on the flow of digested food. It turns out that at that stage they initiate. I'm not using certain terms. They initiate the temperature to go up. If the temperature goes up by 1 degree in our body, the protein production increases by at least 10%. So imagine that, let's say we have even by 20%. This determines that such temperature is not just a signal that something is going on wrong, but through the structures in which the collagen participates, it stimulates our defense mechanism, which is a very important piece of information. You see that the intestinal villi have a super important blood supply. And what are they? They are also made of connective tissue. And of course, the structure of lymphatic vessels or arteries is different. Arteries have to be stronger because blood is disturbed under pressure. Even the smallest arterial capillaries have different structure to the veins that drain. Naturally, there are so-called valves in the veins and they drain the blood. And all of that is happening in the intestines, but throughout the body. And that's also determined by collagen.
I have told you that it's actually the tissue, the connective tissue, which decides this. Connective tissue, again, the proper connective tissue. It forms something like a scaffolding, not only for the organs, the structure of the organs, but among other things, it protects them together with each other. In other words, they shouldn't get too close to each other. Sometimes in examinations, for example, of the kidneys, which are on the opposite sides of our body in the lower cavity, we find that they move as much as 30% downwards because the elasticity of this tissue, depending on our position, causes this. There were times in the past when there were no additional examinations, for example, by means of ultrasound. So, for example, the kidney was tracked and they wanted to do a biopsy, to take a sample. And they were poking at the part that hadn't been previously determined. That's because it had slipped up by up to 5 centimeters in the meantime. But it all depends on this connective tissue properties. And finally, the skin. We could talk a lot about our skin because we wanted to look great, look beautiful. It's mainly about its elasticity, tone, and slower aging process. Imagine that glycine itself has an antioxidant capacity, but above all, slowing down this aging process basically optimizes the regenerative capacity at the level of each individual's genetic capacity. And it's not the case that every person can age at the same time, even with ideal nutrition. It all depends on the nutritional material in which we provide collagen. It has to be valuable, fully valuable. Imagine. Well, let me give you a very unfavorable example. For example, there are chickens bred for meat. And at this point, this chicken, after being slaughtered, looks like an ugly flab lying around. So to make it look nice, fluids are pumped into the body and they make it taut. But these fluids are chemical. So we consume a product that carries with it toxic compounds in addition to collagen. So in fact, what is being introduced today in the European Agriculture Act is to come to our senses, to get rid of it, because we are going to start dying like flies after eating such food. And this is a dramatic moment because the outside world, for example, let's say some Asian powers may not respect and generally do not respect these standards. And they flood us with products that are cheap, and there is always someone who wants to trade and who wants to buy it. So please remember, if you care about your health, you need to produce a clean product, which is difficult to come by, but which will be also more expensive. I was recently at a food market, and I wanted to buy some tomatoes. Do you know how much they were? 40 zloty. And the Western European ones cost 8 zloty. So you see, quality has its price. So what I want to say is that this elasticity depends on collagen. Of course, not only collagen, but also hyaluronic acid. But I will have the opportunity to tell you more about it later. So what else does it support? First and foremost, joint function. We are talking about joints that connect the bones in movement. This is a unique structure because just as our skin ages, and it ages unevenly in humans, if today the world has sped up in the way we do all things, then cortisol appears. In athletes, it is a normal factor because if I want to succeed, I need this stimulating stress. But if the stress lasts for a long time, then at this point of regeneration of the body, it causes not only anaerobic respiration, but also there is lactic acid, which acidifies the muscles, and you need to neutralize cortisol as a chemical oxidative factor. You need to introduce something antioxidant, while collagen, in this case, is the most commonly expected product that regenerates the joint surface. We've got the so-called joint capsule. We imagine that this is a capsule, for example, in the knee. The tibia joins the fibula, and right there is the capsule that surrounds it, and it has both an elastic semi-fluid and a fibrous layer. And there is also a synovial substance combined with fat in order to secrete, well, lubricant, like in rotating wheels. In the knee, we also have the meniscus and the tendons. The meniscus is a kind of ball inside, a shock absorber, so that the bones do not rub against each other. It is the resultant synovial substance, which is also a lubricant. There are also tendons. If we talk about ligaments, they connect the bones together in a stable way. There are a lot of ligaments, medial, posterior, lateral, anterior, but there are also tendons. The tendons connect the muscles. And we also have the patella in the knee. The patella is a little elastic plate that, like a shock absorber, for the thigh muscles, strengthens the leg when we bend our knee. This happens automatically, for example, when we run or step forward. And these mechanisms all depend on collagen. And finally, collagen helps to reduce the onset of inflammation. The situation is quite interesting here because I have to tell you about fibroblasts. Fibroblasts are derivatives of the stem cells that remain for the rest of our lives to regenerate everything. And in a situation of an inflammation, which can occur when we eat some contaminated products, polluted with chemical compounds, preservatives, particulate matter from the air, or even cortisol. But more often than not, the simplest inflammation, for example, is when we cut our skin. And at that point, this is what happens. It's the fibroblasts that start to circulate and stimulate the process of saving the situation. Thanks to them, the fibrin becomes solid. And it causes clotting. Later, other cells appear. The first cells to appear lead to a fight or defense against the bacteria that have got inside. There are also the neutrophils that devour. Other cells begin to initiate this medium, which causes something like a granuloma to start forming. This is the point at which the vessels that were previously intact start to dilate to provide mediators. And at this point, there is a change in the nature of this fibrinogen. Fibrogen, which is thickened, starts to form when we have striated muscle tissue, because the striated tissue in our intestines is smooth tissue. So it forms smooth tissue because it tightly starts to repair all of it. So if the wound heals, the inflammation ends, and at that point, this wound surface is more durable than the other tissues. If there was a broken bone, the fracture site, thanks to this strengthening by another structure, a stronger one, it never breaks for a second time. It can, if there is a tension that causes damage to the bone, it is generally below the existing fracture. So this shows the self-repair mechanism, but again, without collagen, this wouldn't work. It's amazing, doctor. I was listening to you and I've realized that our body is an amazing machine and can cope perfectly well if we do not disturb it. Yes, but now I have to come to this regeneration. As I said, the reproductive connective tissue basically forms from mesenchyme to shape the newborn to the very moment of its birth. It means that, as you can see, it's as if our body is a tree that starts to wither more and more. And at this point, the self-repair mechanism is stimulated. I use this unscientific expression. Well, due to the fact that this mesenchyme function in the form of activity remains. And what happens then? If the organism is in danger, other organs that are in a better state lend energy or even material to rebuild this structure. But again, without collagen, nothing will happen, because let me remind you that the arteries and veins through which all the components for reconstruction are transported through are, after all, also the structure in which collagen is contained. Not to mention that the liver, which must then activate the enzymes that are necessary for this regeneration, is also structured on the level of this element, the collagen. Finally, there is the need for the regeneration and production of synovial cartilage. I've told you that this is very important not only for sportsmen and sportswomen, but also for us. Because if we lead this very static lifestyle, that is, we don't move much, then on the one hand, it would seem that our joints are spurred, unlike those of sports people. Sports people who treat it as a profession, so for the short period of their activity, they need to be at the highest level of fitness. So their diet is generally cleaner than that of a typical person. But let me tell you, because today I am working not only with Polish athletes, but also with prominent English athletes and doctors there, and try to help them introduce natural means of regeneration. And what I found is that they are practically programmed as post-sports invalids. And I have a few of these athletes who, up to the age of 44, were marathon runners. They won, they were in the top on all continents. And suddenly it turns out that they are unhappy for two reasons. They would like to keep running, but they feel the pain. But they start wise supplementation, and after some time, it turns out that a miracle happened, because they can still run and win as a senior. Of course, with a competition with the youngsters, in a competition with the youngsters, they wouldn't match up. But in their category, and again in the world, they have no equals. So the right building material here is pure collagen. And this applies not only to athletes, but to us too. If we're sitting at home, make sure we do it every day in the morning. It can be organized. I am not saying it has to be 45 minutes like I do it every evening when I get home, even at 1 o'clock. But let's do it. Otherwise, because I sit at the computer a lot, like I did today, recording something or on stage, I just don't have enough movement. You know, in the past, I danced in a ballet school like an athlete. If I trained 5 days a week for 5 hours at a time, that means that practically my body learned to use the material it needed. And at that time, I was also taking care of myself. I had already started to learn the information about how to regenerate the organism. But if I compare the knowledge of today with then, you know, that is the Middle Ages. And that was the 1970s. So today we are so well equipped with knowledge, and I am only passing on fragments to you. And now we come to the point when we talk about the value of our rights. This is the sense that it's most valuable to every human being, because firstly, we see the world, the richness of the world. We are inspired, we enjoy the beauty, but at the same time, we learn knowledge directly, not only visually. We read the content written by people who are wiser than us, because there is no shortage of such people. It's important to note that we should also improve our knowledge. So if we want to use it, we should remember that the computer is a source of easy information. At the same time, it's very damaging to our eyesight. So in fact, it's worth saying about the collagen, coming to an end of my speech, that it differentiates into 29 types. As far as the eyesight is concerned, it is primarily built up of type 2. If we're talking about the skin, it's basically of type 1 and type 2. So imagine that the type 1 collagen basically occupies 80 to 90% of all other types. So basically, type 1 dominates. But for example, some organs, just like the lens of the eye, need type 4. Also, our cornea. In the eyeball, every day, 80% of the replacement of functioning building material is collagen. So this eyesight also depends on how you look at the monitor too long or at your smartphone constantly. At the same time, your eyesight gets damaged. So at least save it with good supplementation.
Paulina, are you watching the time? Yes, we've got plenty of time. We can continue, but I'm happy that you're watching the time. Well, I'm not really checking the time. So, ladies and gentlemen, if we wanted to just complete this value, which is the natural, clear collagen, if we were to consider what I've said, what's happening with food production today, which contains collagen in large amounts, like pork knuckles, they've got plenty of collagen. If I were to compare the natural material with great amount of collagen, those would be, well, like newborn animals like lamb or also calf legs. The problem is if that the mother was supplemented with material that has been contaminated, so with her milk, she's going to pass it on to the baby. And in fact, if you want to supplement the needs of the body with materials which would rebuild what has already been in our locomotor system or blood vessels, or among which enhances our immunity and efficiency and absorption, then we need to reach for collagen, because there is a potential. If our skin is like too wrinkled, we need collagen, right? So we need to make sure that we have some parameters met. First of all, there is no question of zero GMO. Avoid products which are genetically modified. If preserved naturally, it is certainly not thermally, because we destroy the regeneration activators, which are vitamins. But at the same time, part of the protein It's also damaged by the temperature, not to mention any chemical methods which are used to preserve food, because at this point there is a part of food material which is inactive. Material is of a natural origin. If it's 100% extract, there are such plants in the world because they're adaptogenic plants which carry factors which, surprisingly for the scientific world, are able to use and activate the active substances which has been standardized for, because it always needs to be defined if we introduce product onto a market that this specific substance, some compound that we need, in this case is also standardized with respect to collagen. It must be absolutely pure, that is, say, free. And of course, there are areas that these plants provide us with such plants, such as cat's claw, or we could say the 5-flavored food. They're used as far as needed, and the rest, the surplus, can be removed with the surplus in the urine. If you had an inflammation, an illness, you'd go for a medicine, right? Medication. I'm not saying that medicine is bad. Medicine must intervene in a good way, but it gives the substance itself without biological background. And what happens next? The body can use it, like get rid, destroy the bacteria that cause the acute inflammation and failure of a particular organ. But the chemistry itself, without biological background, starts to affect, negative impact on the liver. The side effects appear immediately. So antagonists must be excluded. What does it mean? Antagonists must be excluded, which means that one plant substance has an alkaline reaction, the other one has an acidic reaction, and one is sensational if we consume it alone. If we give it together without the so-called buffer in the form of another plant, which is like a mediator, they might interact with the effect that they don't give us what we're expecting. This is just simply a chemical reaction, and that needs to be ruled out. A smart technology is just about that. And if, for example, like in some products, we have 13 ingredients, goodness me, it is the time that was needed. But today, naturally, we can program certain things by computer. And I would need to tell you that what I analyzed for 16 years, working on very complicated ingredients to obtain such a product. I spent 16 years. Today, I've calculated that I would take 2 years because of the progress in computerization, which would make it easier for me. But when we talk about the value, that also the packaging of the product must guarantee its stability. And in this case, there is a method of exclusion and minimizing the process, but also pressure preparation, excluding chemistry and temperature. And this is the process which, when we talk about a product, which at least the product I'm responsible for, I don't want to tell you all of that because today we have a team of people working on it, but these are the qualities that it holds. And ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to show you collagen, which has value in itself. First of all, collagen comes from fish. And why is it so? It turns out that these amino acids that I've told you about are more or less linked. And here, let you assured, if we talked about type 1 and 2, if we get this collagen from fish, which might contain all amino acids, and it should, because it's from the skin itself, the structure is so loose that it is almost soluble, and it really easily relates to the sequence that is the order of connection in a man. In a human, it's easier to get, and I told you that glycine alone itself has huge values, and proline also, depending of the presence of hyaluronic acids, and absorbs water. Here, of course, we have glucosamine sulfate, which comes from most pure form of marine animals. Here we talk about that, it comes from the crustaceans, but also there is chondroitin, and it is found, for example, in the skeleton of a shark. and naturally it can be derived from other sources, such as shrimps. In this case, you'd need vitamin C, which is a factor which causes changes in the nature of proline or glycin, and also introduce lysine as a third amino acid, so the elasticity is higher, and from acerola, because it is a plant that has a pure form with a full biological background. And let me just remind you that the ascorbic acid, which is identified with vitamin C, it is effective only in the presence of the background, and which is lipoic acid, lycopene carotene, vitamin B, vitamin B6, zinc, and magnesium. If one ingredient is missing, it is absorbed in a poor way. If it's left on its own, we have to give it a gigantic amount. And because it is an acid, it can also acidify the structures of our digestive tract. So please bear in mind how important it is that we provide the proper elements. And we have also bamboo and field horsetail or nettle. It's all silicon. Well, we have plenty of silicon in the horsetail. The problem is that it's not even counted as a micronutrient for simple reason. There is a lot of it. It would seem that it enters our body, but it should come to our body from plants, which are either phytoremediating, which exclude the inclusion of some negative elements and components with it. So nettle or horsetail, which grows in specific conditions, which through bacteria that cooperate, that's cleaned from the bacteria, which guarantee clean silica, but also bamboo. Fresh bamboo shoots also provide silicon. The initiation of, like, let's say, regeneration of bones is just precisely that stem cells are stimulated with silicon. So is the regeneration of other structures. Without silicon, most regeneration is not going to happen. This is one of the factors, but it's very important. So it needs to have stimulators. And there is magniferin, which is an antioxidant substance found in mango. It is a fantastic plant. If I were to speak about it more, I'd have plenty of time. I was supposed to be watching the time. Well, so let's move on. For the convenience, not just ourselves, for the sportswomen, it is the key. If you go, let's say, trying to plan a journey, let's say if police stopped us and they said we've been drink driving, that's what the breathalyzer would say. If you smelled alcohol, breathalyzer would show it. I'm sorry, it is a joke, but that's how it goes. But going back, it is convenient because it's not just a concentrated form for a normal person who doesn't do like a heavy workout. I would even advise that you divide it into 2 parts, not all at once, because there is like 9 grams. But what's important, it is enriched with natural vitamin D3. Without vitamin D3, the so-called mineral management, here many bones or even cartilage need to be built with it. Which is extremely necessary. It also affects the rest and other connective tissue, the blood vessels, the heart, which is just pump of your life. And also we have the extract of these chondroitin and glucosamine derivatives, which come from the New Zealand mussel, which provides those ingredients which I've told you about earlier. This is one of the purest organisms when it comes to all these ingredients. And then there's also extract from the blood rock algae. And this algae has this feature that it holds iodine. The iodine is extremely important for our thyroid gland. The thyroid gland, especially for athletes, is important because it regulates most of the physiological processes in the body, which is like activity, ability to focus, using one muscular strength at one moment. And it decides very often as compared to a prime minister. They need to react to the changes in what our body does. The prime minister also needs to decide with new suggestions of how to solve problems. And this is the iodothyronine and thyroxine, which are decisive. But why iodine? Why is it so important? Because this is iodine which has been ionized, and our body is still in need of those. If we were to get iodine from different environment, which would need to be reprogrammed, then we would lose plenty of energy from the reproduction. And we have a ready ingredient, which with vitamin E, and with vitamin E, we can compare the so-called youth factor. So let's call it youth factor, because for our skin and also for the regeneration, it slows down the aging process of all tissues, but also for our joints, for our skin. It is the key to maintain our fitness and our health. And finally, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, what is that? It's a yeast. Of course, we have more species of yeasts, but this particular yeast is able to produce a content of metabolites which contain selenium. And selenium itself is a gigantic antioxidant. So even if you endure stress, in other words, on an ongoing basis, cortisol, it's able to bind it. But in this case, it controls iodine so that it doesn't over expand the whole amount of work of hyperthyroidism. So this is the fine selection. Please, once again, let me remind you that this product is not just for your convenience. If you use it like 2 doses a day, not all amounts, so don't take too much, but always take it together. As I have told you, if you have it at home, take it with breakfast, liquid collagen, because this is the form with the biological background. This has been optimally fitted and enriched, so it's convenient, but also we have additional factors which were not present before. I'm talking about iodine, selenium, or the Saccharomyces cerevisiae. What is important, this yeast also stimulates the thymus gland. The thymus gland is also active primarily in children as they grow up. Through its structure, it does not increase or decreases. So in children who do not have the so-called non-specific immunity developed through exposure to environmental threats, the thymus gland works by producing the so-called natural killers, the factors that act, which before the proteins are formed, they act. In humans, at least until the age of 60, the thymus is still working, but there are people who live beyond 100. So active thymus, try and have it active as long as you can. In this case, this collagen powder is able to get you just that thing.
Finally, I would like to say this to you. Today, of course, I have referred in a fragmentary way, I would say in a popular scientific way, to in-depth scientific studies about the value of collagen and the physiological processes that take place in the body. You have the documentation, the reading list displayed here, if any of the professional would like to refer to it. Forgive me if in speaking too commonly, I refer to certain scientific issues in a simple way, but I wanted to be clear. I would like to thank you today for your attention. I am always happy when I can share what makes me happy. Nature is an open book of wisdom and a source of health. Everything natural is increasingly valuable today. Respect your naturalness too. Try to control your emotions so that cortisol is not too abundant. The acceleration in life causes social bonds to disappear. I ask you to smile at yourself, and at the same time, even supplements will work easier. I wish you a smile, a nice complexion, and above all, fitness. Yes, doctor, thank you very much. Let me now go back for a moment to the slide which you presented before, because I have the great pleasure of sharing with you some very good information. there is a special offer on these two products today and until the 17th of April. You can find out more about this special offer on the shop's website, www.myduolife.com, to which I invite you. I think this is a unique opportunity to use these products. This special offer is waiting for you in the My Duo Life shop, and I would like you to take advantage of it. What I have definitely taken from this lecture, Doctor, is that collagen is an absolute basis for our health, quality of life, and functioning at an appropriate level. Yes, I will say it again when it comes to the construction of our body, our beauty, but also activity, nutrition, and recovery. Look at how many levels we have. I'd like to say one more thing. When we talk about the fact that the proper collagen forms the scaffolding for the other organs and their structure, such as the liver, for example. The liver is the largest internal organ, which weighs 1.5 kilograms. And if the skin weighs 5 kilograms together with that 20 kilograms, you can see the difference. And it needs to be looked after too. At this point, speaking of collagen, imagine that without it, these structures would not nourish themselves properly. So please appreciate the value of a good product in small amounts, because it is able, even though you are taking something incorrect, something bad with your food, then also you take antioxidants in the form of other elements. And only collagen will fill this void to regenerate our organism so that we are physically and intellectually fit. Because finally, these fibroblast cells also affect the glium, that is the central nervous system. After all, sight is connected directly, all the sentence, of course, because the epithelium is also the sensory reproductive epithelium. The cells of the uterus are also the epithelium that produces the cells from which the next human life can arise. So everything is linked to this collagen. Appreciate this purest product, try to replenish it with what is present in food, but often it's polluted. So complete it with the supplement. Once again, I wish you joy, health, and of course, a smile on your face. Share this joy of life and try to exclude negative emotions. In life, as in nature, there is an up and down fluctuation. And in the end, I would like to say to you not to worry about the fact that something bad has happened to you, because sometimes it is an experience that teaches you wisdom for the future. It is the case in nature, and I often give this example of what I saw was when I was a child, or since I was a child, that more or less every 7 years, the oak trees have an abundance, a lot of acorns. And for 7 years afterwards, the trees wait to gather their strength. It's the same in our lives. Things changed, but the consequence of this was that while the trees were gathering strength from the acorns, the strength from the acorns was gained by, for example, wild boars. And by eating a large amount of acorns, a female boar could give birth to several piglets. The wolves then had the consolation of having something to eat. Of course, it looks dramatic, or it sounds dramatic, but they ate mainly the sick ones. So it's selection in the environment, and everything was back to normal again. Back to normal. Collagen will help you with that. Doctor, once again, a huge thank you very much for today's meeting, for such large attention. Also, I would like to thank the audience. And I have a heartfelt request to you. Please let me know in the comments if you want more meetings like this to discover together with Dr. Piotr Kardasz about this very wisdom of nature, a wisdom which has resulted in such exceptional products.